I've done a lot of stints at early stage startups. I've been a founder. I know what it's like to have to do everything. And, I've had managers who luckily have helped me understand, like, hey, not everything is a priority. Even if it seems urgent or seems important, maybe it's not. And it is actually better to sequentially process things rather than parallel process things. And what I've realized by actually trying to live that is you do actually get done faster by doing things one at a time and being hyper-focused rather than saying, oh, I've got 5 projects, I'll do 20%, 20%, 20% on all of them, because then you start incurring those switching costs that I was mentioning. And, you will take 15, 30 minutes to get your brain switched off the first thing and then on to the other thing.
That was Rahul Desai, General Manager of Chief of Staff Network, a community membership for Chiefs of Staff to network and learn from their peers in the industry. Now, Rahul is like the mini CEO of this business. He's the person responsible for making this business profitable while delivering a great member experience. So, if you're managing, building, or planning to build a community membership business, you should continue listening. In this episode, Rahul talks about who his customers are and why they spend the money on this membership.
We want to be the preeminent peer support group for chiefs of staff all around the world. And if you go looking for these groups, either they don't exist or they're incredibly pricey.
Rahul reveals the tactics that he has used to get member close rate from 30% to 80%.
We added friction to the process and it made a world of difference.
He'll also talk about why he believes members of small teams should be hyper-focused instead of doing everything.
I think when you don't have resources, the way that you deliver speed and quality is by having this maniacal focus on one thing.
Finally, Piyush asked some questions on how a 20-year-old should be thinking about their career.
I'm fresh out of college. I don't know what I want to do with my life, but I don't want to do what people around me are doing. What should I do?
If you're like me, listening to Pros like Rahul can directly help you better at your craft. But you probably don't have 1 hour every week to listen to all the episodes. That's why you should sign up for our newsletter. We recently started it to share the key insights from these conversations in a more readable format. So, go to beginnermaps.com to sign up for our weekly newsletter. That's beginnermaps.com. Now, let's start the show.
Hey, welcome to Beginner Maps, where we showcase stories of scary career pivots so that you get the courage, path, and role models to carve out a career that you love.
I'm gonna start by talking about Chief of Staff. Just give us a 2-minute intro on what Chief of Staff is, who are the members, what's the business model?
Yeah, absolutely. I can go through all of that. So as you mentioned, I've only been in this role for a few months, I think 4 or 5 months now. And the Chief of Staff Network, therefore, of course, predates me. It was founded in 2016 as a dinner club for Chiefs of Staff by a guy named Scott Amenta. He's still involved, but sort of doing other aspects of the business now. And I was brought on to be the general manager, sort of lend a commercial focus to the business, aid in growth, sponsorships, sort of really get that business aspect of it to the next level, not just the thriving community that it was. And so really what we're about is we want to be the preeminent peer support group for chiefs of staff all around the world. And if you go looking for these groups, either they don't exist or they're incredibly pricey, or there's no way of knowing what the quality is going to be before you sign up. And what we're trying to do is be a place where we'll show you, up front, if you come to interview, we'll show you what you're going to get. And we try to be hyper-focused on tools and tactics, right? Because in this role, chief of staff is so amorphous and so vague. And basically every chief of staff role is different. And so what we're trying to do is optimize how quickly you can learn the problems that you have and how to solve them. Because ultimately, like, the speed of execution in that role is what will dictate your success or failure. And often it's a very lonely role. In many companies, you're the only one who has that title. There's no one you can talk to because you're often dealing with sensitive HR issues or financing or other confidential types of problems. And so really, this is a place where you can come and feel that you can ask any question. No one's going to think you're stupid. No one's going to judge you. No one's going to violate your trust. In all the years that this community has been active, I've never heard of a case where someone has violated the trust of another member by sharing something that they should not have. And so that's sort of the overview of the community. I really boil it down to, we're a peer support group for chiefs of staff. And our members really are quite variable in sort of their backgrounds, where they come from, where they work. We've got people at 10-person companies all the way up to your 10,000 plus person Fortune 500s. Our biggest sector by far is enterprise software, so B2B SaaS companies. Our next largest group is finance and fintech, and then we have a long tail of everything else. We've got folks at nonprofits. We've got folks in political consulting, biotech, agriculture, you name it. Like, we've got folks all over the place. And often these people join for the reasons I mentioned, is that they often feel very lonely in their role. They don't have someone they can talk to. They're facing a lot of new problems, either to them or to their business. And so they don't know where they can go to learn more about solving those problems. And often these are problems that have been solved somewhere else in the world, but the solutions are never shared because it's a competitive advantage to not share those things. And so really the reason people join is you get this massive community of 670 plus chiefs of staff. And our business model really revolves around that member and the dues that they pay. So our membership dues are $85 a month or $850 for the year. So if you do the year, you get 2 months free. And we really feel that we're leaving some money on the table so that we can be more accessible to as many people as we can reach. Across all these geographies, across companies of different sizes. There are other associations out there that charge, thousands and thousands of dollars. We feel that that's not really right, because there are people at small companies who would really benefit from the resources we offer, but their budget is not, $2,000, $5,000, $10,000. It's $500. And so we work really hard to provide scholarships and make it so that people across all stages, sizes, geographies can really find a home with us. And, that was a ramble from me, so I'll pause there.
Not a ramble at all. This was great. I don't really know much about the chief of staff role. So hearing a little bit about this, this was very interesting to me. I want to focus on 3 things that you said. So you said that such a support network does not exist. And one of the things that you do is that you make it more accessible by having a very accessible price point to the community. And then you make it very transparent on what people get before they enter the community. So take me through each of them. So you already mentioned about why you have lowered the price point. Tell me, why doesn't support groups for chiefs of staff exist more around the world?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. The role didn't really proliferate until probably the pandemic. If you look back on the prevalence of these roles, looking at compensation data or the Wayback Machine for job sites and whatnot, the reason that our community was initially founded back in 2016 was that our founder, Scott, just felt really lonely in his role. Like I was mentioning, he was the only chief of staff at his company. He didn't know anyone else with the title. And he started asking around with his investors, his founders, hey, do you know anyone who's doing this kind of work? And so it started off as this group of 5 people, and then it grew and snowballed from there. But even today, when I talk to people who want to join from Asia and various countries in Africa, they're still saying, oh, this role is not well understood here. People think, oh, I'm an executive assistant or I'm a secretary or something like that. And that's not really what these people are doing. They are strategic leaders. They're thought partners to their executives. And in many cases, they are often executives in their own right. And I think what's happening is that this shift from the chief of staff role appearing a lot in the military and government in medicine is now transitioning into the private sector. That happened in the US in, let's call it, the mid-teens. It's proliferated quite a lot here. I think we now see the transitioning happening in Europe. And then if you get into LATAM, Asia, Africa, it's basically infinitesimal in the rate at which you see this role appear. And now I think this year, finally, we're seeing people really start to pick up steam on this role. And so I think that's why the communities don't really exist. Like, you'll see some local groups pop up, a bunch of friends who get together for lunch or whatever. And, that's admirable. I think more people should be doing that to stave off a lot of the loneliness you see in this role. But the reason why you don't see these massive global networks is because there was no reason for them up until, a couple of years ago.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And what do you think is the impact of price point on the community? Because I understand that communities and membership communities, since they're made up of people, and the value that we get is from the people themselves. So the price point that you have, it changes the entire value that the member receives. Have you felt this?
Yeah. So I've done actually a ton of research on communities and pricing, because I was curious, like, where could we raise our prices to without really hitting that cutoff of we're no longer accessible? And for us, we often have our memberships paid by L&D budgets, right? It's companies saying, oh, I think this is a worthwhile spend for you to grow as my chief of staff. Why don't you go there? We'll cover it, whatever. And what we see is that those budgets really, at startups especially, I'm not talking about the biggest companies out there, but at startups, these budgets often are in the hundreds of dollars, maybe up to 1,000, but not really more than that. And so I see these three tiers of spend on communities. There are communities where you pay, well, let's call it four tiers. There are free communities, right? You join them because they're not charging anything. They're probably making money by having a massive base of people joining, huge audience, and then they make their money on sponsorships and affiliate sales and things like that. And there are a lot of very successful communities that have done that, right? If you think of the communities that have hundreds of thousands of members, they're really monetizing off these sponsorships, doing conferences, stuff like that. And that's, of course, a very viable model. And then you have communities where you pay out of pocket. And those are really like, you spend up to $50 a month, let's call it. That's sort of the cutoff, especially now where people are becoming so price sensitive given what's happening in the broader macro economy. So really, you're not going to be seeing people pay more than, $25, $50 for some of these communities where they're expected to pay out of pocket. And then you've got communities like us where it's, let's call it like the $500 to $1,000 range per year. And those are, it's a little tough to get people to pay out of pocket for that. It's really a corporate outlay of L&D expenditure. And then at the very high end of the market, you have communities that are executive facing, and their price point is many thousands of dollars per year. And there are communities in the operator space, the big community that's been around for decades that we can point to is Young Presidents Organization, YPO, that, many people know of it, and their price point is enormous. And most people can't afford it. Like, you have to be the CEO typically to be able to afford that kind of a budget. And that's really the sorts of four things that I see in community land. Typically, the most successful ones are the low end of the market and the high end of the market. Either you're charging the massive fees and you have a few customers, or you're free and you're making the money on the back end off sponsors. And so it remains to be seen whether we're actually in no man's land and like there's a ceiling on growth here. But sort of that's where we're at, and we'll figure it out.
I love this riff about pricing and community, because I think it's really smart to go after the L&D budget, because I remember when I was working at a startup and they had an L&D budget, there was a channel where members of the team would post like some of the ways that they've been using their budgets. And in my experience, I think that most people do not know how to spend their budgets, like $500,000 that they have for personal L&D. So going after these budgets and providing something valuable with them, I think that can be a really lucrative business model. I think you may be on the right track.
Yeah, I mean, certainly going after L&D makes a lot of sense. We're sort of in this interesting place where people find us as individuals, and then we teach them how to use their L&D budget through pages on our website and scripts and stuff like that that they can use. And often it's a pretty easy conversation because of the price point seeming relatively fair for what you get in the offering. But to do the real enterprise sale, right, to go to an HR manager and say, hey, I want to upskill your entire team of 10, 50, 100 people, the price is going to be, $50,000 to $100,000. That's a very different sale. And I personally don't know yet, at least, how to navigate that sort of a thing.
Right. And okay, this brings us to my my next question, which is, how did you get the close rate from 30% to 80%? Tell us.
Yeah, that's it's a great question, because I actually just created an internal training on it so that people in the future will understand what we do.
Perfect.
Earlier this morning. So it was very timely to ask this. And really, what we were doing wrong in the beginning was that our website was all over the place. Like, often in marketing and sales, you hear about your funnel and having a leaky funnel or a funnel that really draws people through. And we were unsure what we wanted people to do. Like, we were prioritizing all these different behaviors that were contradictory to each other. So on our website,
give me an example, like what were the different behaviors? Yeah.
So on our website, in our nav bar, we had like probably 10 plus different links you could click through. That's confusing and distracting. So we cut that back to probably 4 top level things and then some bullets underneath. And then on the web page, we were directing people to apply for the paid membership. But then at the time, we also had this free membership called Insider, but we didn't do enough education about what the difference was between Insider and Pro, the paid one. And eventually I ended up killing this Insider membership because it was a distraction. Like, we saw hundreds of people flocking there instead of going into the paid membership for, objectively a worse offering. And then people would come back to me and say, oh, I'm a member, right? And I'm like, not really. You don't get access to Slack, you don't have the networking, you don't have a lot of these things that are the cornerstone of the community. You don't really have a community to speak of, right? You're getting our newsletter, you're getting some other incidental things. And so killing that was a massive thing we did. You can go in the Wayback Machine and see what our website looked like in September of last year when I joined. It's massively different now. It's just a much more focused experience. It is really pointing you towards that application moment of, here's our pro membership, you should apply, here are all the reasons to do that. And then that sort of all those, like, they were tons of changes across the website. I think probably 50 plus changes in terms of copy and web pages and links and stuff like that. But then, and all that was accretive a little bit, like that drove probably 10% improvement. And then, the next obvious question is, well, what drove the other 40%? And that was really doing interviews. We added friction to the process, and it made a world of difference. What we used to do was basically, we had people apply, they would write up their little bio of why they deserve to be in the community. They would give us LinkedIn, and we would go look at that and basically thumbs up, thumbs down, you should be in the community, you should not be in the community. And it was all very transactional, right? It was all very email driven. And there was no sense of humanity in it, right? Like, it's a community. It should feel like there are people here. And so we implemented this admissions interview process, which I think made a huge difference, because it enabled us to learn more about people who were doing chief of staff work, but didn't have the chief of staff title for whatever reason. And often companies do that because they don't want to pay you more. So aside to people who are listening and want to know why that happens to them, this interview made a world of difference, because what we saw was that people who were interested but not interested enough wouldn't email us their questions. But when they were in the meeting with me for admissions, we would talk about why they should be in the community. We would talk about their background. A lot of the stuff that you asked me early on, and that we've talked about aside from this sort of call, there was no venue for them to share that. And then there was no venue for them to say, oh, here are my questions about the community. And having that moment together with me enabled them to say, oh, I'm wondering about the events you do, or I'm thinking about these classes. Can you tell me more? And I think a lot of that sort of ability to have Q&A drove a big amount of the difference. I think having a human face and seeing, oh, this is something real, and I show off like, here's the Slack, here's the courses, here's all the stuff. Being able to see that live is extremely valuable because it's very humanizing. And then you see all the stuff that our members are talking about every single day. And, we all know that some of these communities that got founded during the pandemic are ghost towns now. And that's a real fear, especially if you're paying a lot of money to join that community. And so for us being able to show, okay, there's people here, there are human beings, they're helpful, that's extremely valuable. And then just being able to talk to people about their pricing and see if they need a scholarship, especially in some of these regions that are not earning the same disposable income as you see in the US and Western Europe. Sometimes those people would get the prior emails transactionally that we used to have and say, oh, the price is this much, like I can't afford that. I don't even earn that much. And so being able to talk to people and hear from them, oh, I think my company can't cover that, but they can cover this much. Can you help me? That enables me to go look at our financials and say, oh, can we do a scholarship here? Can we help this person out a little bit? And that goes back to this virtue of, we want to be accessible and inclusive to people. And all of that ultimately, like the website changes plus the interview and sort of the knock-on effects of that interview is how we got that close rate up to 80%.
Wow. Okay. So this interview process, I want to just focus on this one because this makes a ton of sense. What you just said about how having this face-to-face experience can make the members, more comfortable with the community and what you're offering. That makes a lot of sense why that would increase the conversion rates. But I want to go to the moment when you were making this decision about introducing this admissions process. And the number one fear that I would have about this is that it's not scalable, or it will require too much of manpower, because just clicking like a yes or no on the every applicant's application, that requires much less effort than to have a 30-minute interview with every single applicant that comes in. So how did you think about this?
Great question. So it's not a 30-minute interview. I figured out how to condense it into a 15-minute interview, which makes a world of difference. And actually, in the most productive interviews, you can actually even get it down to like 10 minutes. And so there is like marginal efficiency to be had on the timing element. I think 30 minutes is like this anchor. It's a bias that we all have of like, oh, that's the standard length of a meeting. And what I find is that having the default actually be 15 is both better for me and more attractive to these busy people, right? A chief of staff often is, if not an executive, like a manager level person in their own right. And they're busy. These people are either in meetings all day, they're doing very big projects. They don't really have extra time to be taking on these like extraneous meetings. And so to be able to say, hey, I only need you for 10, 15 minutes, extremely valuable to them. And showing that, hey, our focus is on efficiency, productivity. That's our whole ethos here, is that's what we want to do for you. It's a way of living what we try and preach to these people,
And walk me through these 15 minutes. Like, so do you have you must have some script prepared, or what does that? Can you walk me through it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first few minutes, and this, I didn't go in with the script. I sort of just had conversations with people until I figured out what worked and how I could deliver the most value. And ultimately, that's what that conversation ended up being about, was how do we demonstrate value to people? It's not like, I'm not a good salesperson at heart. Like, I didn't grow up in sales. I don't have any sales background. I never learned sales formally. And this whole idea of sales, and we've talked separately about how I'm an introvert. This whole idea of sales is kind of icky to me. And so I really tried to reframe this conversation of, how do I find that a person is the right fit for us? And how do I demonstrate that we can be the right fit for you? And so that way, it's a much more collaborative discussion and something that I am interested in doing and having a conversation about. not so much of like, hey, I'm going to shove my product down your throat. So with all that said, the way we approach this, after I've done, I think probably 100 interviews in the last 2 months,
Wow.
we start off by saying, hey, how did you find us? Because that's the lifeblood of any community, is figuring out what channels are driving people. And for us, it's really a lot of LinkedIn and a lot of search engine results pages. And we don't pay for either of these in terms of advertising. We just have built a sizable blog, and people have shared our links, and they, for whatever reason, people see us on LinkedIn. I'll praise the algorithm for doing that for me. I don't know really how it happens, but I think those are the nice, now we actually understand, okay, people find us these ways. If we want to take out ads, here's how we can do that. If we want to do these things, we can understand how we can build out our channels further. And then the third thing, which of course is the one that I love the most, is word of mouth. Because what I find is that great people attract great people. When we hear that our members are happy with us and they're referring their friends, there's nothing more gratifying than that in a community business, right? Like, if you hear in your podcast, oh, like Rahul referred me his friends to come be a speaker, or now we have new listeners, that feels good, right? At least to me, it feels very warm and fuzzy that someone believed in me and my team enough that they wanted to send their friends here. And so that's really what we spend the first little bit of the interview on. How did you find us? That's probably 2 minutes. And then we do probably another 2 minutes on what are you looking to gain? And really, that's how I find, is there a fit here or not? Because if you're coming to me and saying, oh, I really am trying to use this network as a way to sell to people, that's not going to be a fit. We really don't tolerate spamming people in our community. It's like a it's a 2 strikes policy. You do it once, I'll give you a warning. You do it again, we're going to have a problem. And so, what I really want to hear about is, do you know about us? Have you read on our website the courses that we offer? Do you know what we're all about? Like, have you researched a little bit of what you're looking to gain? Because that's how we know there's a fit. And then the rest of the time, I really spend on catering to what questions they have. And so often I want to show them the community. And so we go through the Slack. I mention, oh, we have this number of members. They're all active in here. Here's our main Slack chat. People are posting every single day, typically getting between 1 and 25 responses, depending on the complexity of the question. I talk them through sort of our course offerings that we have. We've got a number of courses focused on the role, and then we've got general skills classes. I talk about our events. I often look at or ask them where they're calling in from. And if there's been a live event in person in their region, I mention that, or if there's something coming up, I talk to them about that as well. So really, it's really just a lot about what value can we deliver for you. And then we end the interview by saying, all right, well, the dues are going to be $85 a month or $850 for the year. That covers everything we've talked about. There's no hidden fees. Because people worry about that, right? Especially these days. It's, you want to save every extra cent. And so that's very attractive to people, is that you're getting all of these things for a fair price. And then we talk about how you can go back to your manager and discuss, how to get reimbursement from your company. Most people, that's a pretty easy slam dunk for them to do.
Mm-hmm. Wow, this is very insightful. Thank you so much for sharing this your script with me, because I myself consider myself like afraid of sales, and I would it would scare me to my bones to walk into a sales interview thinking that I need to convince this person to buy something now. But the way that you're talking about it, how it is a collaborative process, makes it feel very doable even for me.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I want to understand more about your responsibilities as a general manager there. So you're obviously doing interviews. What else are you focused on?
Yeah. So there was this adage in tech land years ago where people would say, like, the product manager is the mini CEO of the product or something like that. And, at the risk of being a little bit flip, that kind of is my responsibility. Ultimately, I'm the P&L owner for this line of business. And my goal is really make us profitable while also balancing delivering a great member experience. And early on when I joined, it was a little bit difficult to know what I should be focusing on. what ended up happening was that I focused a lot on improving our website and this process to get new members in. But really, the way I approach my role is highly experimental. I try and look at our metrics and see like, oh, our website's failing on these metrics, or our search engine ranking is falling by in these ways, or whatever. But ultimately, I have built these massive data dashboards that tell me everything about our business, like how much revenue are we doing, how many members have we added, how many people have left for whatever reason. On and on and on. What sponsors have we had? What events are we doing? And based on those, I try and figure out what levers can I pull, either directly myself or by working with my team to improve our overall business and, of course, deliver value for the members. Because ultimately, the business does not exist unless we deliver value for the members. And so a lot of my focus has been these admissions interviews and this overall notion of admissions, because there wasn't really someone focused on it before. And what I realized was I was capable of doing it. I had some of the skill sets that would enable me to do it. And I was less upset by doing it than other people on the team. I have other teammates who've got
less upset than other members. I love how you put it. You were less upset than the other members.
Yeah, I mean, I've got other teammate named David. David is exceptional at events and programming. And initially when I joined, I didn't really know how to staff him up on things. I didn't know what to make his focus be. And this quarter, I've told him in conversations, we've realized, oh, he should really be focused on events. And he did this conference in New York last week. It drove a bunch of revenue for us. People gave us amazing remarks as to, how helpful it was for them. We had a sponsor come. The sponsor was very happy with how it worked out. And our keynote speaker was formerly the chief of staff to Ariana Huffington of Huffington Post. Wow. So, David made all of this happen by himself, drove revenue. Like, he's booked, I think, or executed already 20 events this quarter, which is nuts. Like, the level of productivity is insane. And like I and prior managers were responsible for giving him whiplash in previous quarters, where we'd tell him, do this, no, do this, no, do this, no, do this. And it was all different stuff. And, we all incur switching costs mentally when we try and do different things. And so what I've come to realize is, when we're a small group, we're 3 people, we're really under-resourced. And so you have to be hyper-focused about what each teammate is focusing on and what they're executing. And really, I think when you don't have resources, the way that you deliver speed and quality is by having this maniacal focus on one thing. And so David is really just the events guy. He delivers on member experience through the framing of events. And then we've got a team member named Ankit, and Ankit is focused on basically help desk and all of the ancillary parts of the experience. So if you've got a billing question, Ankit will help you on that. If you've got an account management question, a lot of our newsletters are drafted by Ankit. And so he's doing all these things behind the scenes that deliver sort of these other supports for member experience. And then where I sort of focus is, where do we drive commercial value, right? I'm basically focused on the business and the profit and loss statement of the business. And so what that looks like is, how do we increase our member base? How do we get more sponsors? How do we think about launching other communities that might be beneficial to the overarching offering? Because we don't just run Chief of Staff Network, we run another community called BizOps Network. We're thinking about launching some other communities as well in the near to midterm future. And really, that's where my responsibilities lie. It's like, to some degree, I have become a salesperson.
I love it. And okay, so you said just a lot of stuff there. You're like the mini CEO of this community, and this makes it abundantly clear. And then I love the way that you described. You changed the style from having a team member being focused on everything to making them hyper focused and just focusing on their strength instead of that just spreading them thin. I love this. I love this so much because this can be like, even though it makes sense because you said that you're a team of three and you have to be hyper focused to deliver on quality. But what often happens is that when you're a small team, you're asked to do everything. Like that's what most people have their managers asking of them. So I just love your framework around this management stuff.
Yeah, I think I used to be the sort of person that would try and do every task. I've done a lot of stints at early stage startups. I've been a founder. I know what it's like to have to do everything. And, I've had managers who luckily have helped me understand, like, hey, not everything is a priority. Even if it seems urgent or seems important, maybe it's not. And it is actually better to sequentially process things rather than parallel process things. And what I've realized by actually trying to live that is you do actually get done faster by doing things one at a time and being hyper-focused rather than saying, oh, I've got 5 projects, I'll do 20%, 20%, 20% on all of them, because then you start incurring those switching costs that I was mentioning. And, you will take 15 30 minutes to get your brain switched off the first thing and then on to the other thing. And so focus I think has been exceptionally valuable. And if I was to recommend a book on this topic, it would be Amp It Up. It's written by the CEO of Snowflake, and it's very much about this notion of urgency and focus. And then there was a podcast with Ravi Gupta on Invest Like the Best. And he was one of the execs at Instacart. Now he's a partner at Sequoia. And his podcast was like titled Focus. It was great.
I love it. Yeah. And if I can recommend like another book. So this is something that I'm currently reading. It's called Stolen Focus. And this book also talks about a lot of what you just said about how doing different tasks has switching costs. And we think that we are multitasking, but the concept of multitasking was not meant for humans, it was for computers. So we are terrible at multitasking, and we humans as a species, we are only maniacally that we can only focus on one thing.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay, Rahul, so now I'm gonna take us to a little game that Piyush has prepared for us, and over to you, Piyush. Thanks, Hitesh. Rahul, so what we're going to do in this game is I'm going to say some times of the week and you tell me what you may be typically doing by then. Sounds good?
Sounds good.
Okay. What are you doing 10 a.m. on a Saturday?
Oh, man. Typically, actually exercising. So my fiance and I go to an exercise class every week. And typically that's either 9 or 10 on Saturday mornings. And the trainer is an ex-Marine. So, from the American military, he's very intense. And I spend the rest of my Saturday tired. So that's typically
Yeah, I can imagine like being trained by an ex-Marine on Saturday morning.
It's intense. He at one point, so he has a very long driveway outside of the facility that we train at. And it's, it's very no frills. It's like someone's garage. It doesn't even have a bathroom. And at one point he's like, oh, I don't have a weight that's the right size. Just carry my son. And his son was there like,
oh my gosh.
So yeah, that's what I do on Saturdays.
Okay. Now what do you do 8 a.m. on a Monday?
8 a.m. on a Monday. So on this notion of focus, and I think one thing that sort of comes out of focus for me is time boxing. I am someone who really lives and dies by my calendar. Like I use my calendar as my to-do list. I have you guys scheduled on my calendar, then I have my next thing scheduled on my calendar. And every day I start my day with email processing. And so every single day of the week, weekdays at least, sometimes weekends depending, I process all of my email inboxes because I have multiple. I have ones for each community, and then I've got like an overarching one that collects everything else, like sponsorships and stuff like that. And so typically I block half an hour at 8 a.m. to go through my email. And then I try not to look at my email until the next time that I have blocked to look at email. So noonish typically. And the other thing that I do is Readwise, which is it's a flashcarding system for highlights you've taken on Kindle and other reading softwares. And that enables me to remember things that I've learned from the books that I've read. And I didn't realize how much I was forgetting prior to using this tool. But wow, tons of stuff that I have forgotten over the years that I've read books. But yeah, typically that's what 8 a.m. actually every day looks like for me.
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting tool. Readwise, you said, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, 7 p.m. on a Friday.
Oh man. Probably having dinner / playing with my dog. And so my fiance and I try and make it a point to have dinner together as much as we can. She's very busy, and I tend to be fairly busy as well. And so one thing that growing up was exceedingly important for me and my family was that we would always have family dinner together. And so what we try to do is either have our family dinner together, or we sometimes invite friends or go out. But typically around 6-7 p.m., that's what we're doing. And my dog is very needy. She's 1 year old, and so she's still very much a puppy, and just wants to be petted and played with and stuff like that. So in the evening after I'm done with work, that's typically what we also do as well.
I love it. And lastly, what you may be doing by 10 p.m. on a Wednesday?
We were talking earlier about video games. I'm very much a casual gamer, but I do play a lot of video games. And so either I'll be playing a new release or an older release that I've wanted to replay, like one of the blockbuster game of the year type games, like I was mentioning The Witcher 3. And so recently that's what I've been up to late at night, like playing The Witcher 3, or on nights that I'm sort of video gamed out, I'll try and read. And so I had a big kick of nonfiction books, and then I had forgotten how much I liked fiction and fantasy especially. And so I've gotten myself back into fantasy books, and I'm on this trilogy called The Bone Ships, which sort of like high seas, swashbuckling pirate stuff. And there's dragons involved. It's a lot of stuff going on, but actually quite entertaining. The author has done a good job of creating this separate world, and she's come up with like separate words and vocabulary and stuff like that, which makes it feel a lot more real. And that's been nice. And then they're very good about describing how the ship runs. And I've even learned some things about like, oh, I see parallels in my business to how you're describing how the ship runs. And so
what parallel?
Either video games or fantasy.
Do you remember any specific parallel?
There is, I don't remember the exact quote, but the thing that really stuck out to me, I think in the second book in the trilogy, was that this idea of loyalty to the ship and discipline about your loyalty to the ship actually is the superseding concern to everything else. Like being loyal to the ship is more important than being loyal to the captain. It's more important than being loyal to the first mate. Like there's a hierarchy of your loyalties for sure, but ultimately you want to be loyal to the ship, the entity, the higher purpose of the thing itself. And then there's this phrase that they say, because like this whole society is governed by their navy, and the navy is called the fleet. And so the phrase that they keep repeating over and over is "we are fleet." And it's kind of interesting how much flows out of that concept of, you're part of this institution, your loyalty is to the institution. And I think to some degree, like I almost expect that more than I expect loyalty to me. Like what I really want is for people in my team to tell me, oh, you're being dumb in this way, or this idea doesn't make sense. I want people to be loyal to the institution, not to me.
Fascinating. I love it. Yeah. You know how to wind down at the end of the day.
I guess so.
Okay, that brings to the end of this round. Back to you, Nitesh. Thank you.
Thanks, Yash.
This was fun. I loved it.
It was good.
Now, take us back to the questions, Rahul. I want to talk about how you got to where you are right now. So, tell me, how did you get at this role at Chief of Staff?
Yeah, so I had zero intention of landing myself into the community business, like broader consumer social space. All my life I've been a B2B like enterprise person. And so it was very interesting. Like, I don't think anyone who knew me well would have said, oh yeah, Rahul, like he's going to be a community manager. And so the way I fell in here was I spent my entire career in strategy and ops, and I've done a bunch of resume reviews, panel interviews, hiring. Like, I've probably reviewed over 300 resumes at this point. I've probably been on, 100 plus panels. I probably contributed to the hiring of at least 50 to 75 people, I think. And what I keep finding is like operators almost never have all of the skills I want. And that was also true of me when I was coming out of school and early in my career. I did not have the skills that I would have wanted. And I've been very fortunate that people have taken chances on me and enabled me to learn on the job. But right before taking on this chief of staff role, I founded this company, Upslope. And Upslope was meant to be a boot camp for operators to learn all of the things no one ever teaches you on the job. And so we started with something very simple, which is email productivity. As you get more senior, you get more emails. And in my role prior to Upslope, when I was the chief of staff, I was getting on the order of 100, 200 emails a day. And it was detracting from my ability to actually do my job. And I had to figure out, well, how do I process these 100, 200 emails in the span of a half hour, not in like 3 hours? So that way I can get back to doing the things that I was hired to do. And so I created a course based on that. And then I thought, well, all right, there's a bunch of other knock-on things that I've learned that no one has ever taught me. I've just kind of learned them, like how to negotiate, how to story tell a little bit in the business sense, how to cold outreach to people, things like strategy, how do you find insight about a business?
What do you mean by creating courses? So did you just record yourself?
So it was a cohort-based class. It was live. And so I spent the better part, I was thinking about this for a long time. So I spent a year like drafting up all the lecture notes, all of the slides, everything else. And I got together some cohorts of people, and then we would meet up in the evenings for like a quarter. We would go through 25 lessons together. Actually, at least one of the people who went through my class used some of the skills to get a better job. So I was very happy. I think she doubled her income, which made me extremely happy.
That's amazing.
And then other people like someone emailed me back just I think last week or 2 weeks ago saying, oh yeah, your class on SQL queries, like I used that the other day. It was great. Thank you. Yeah, so that's been really gratifying. And as I was going through that, I basically realized like, oh, getting customers is really hard. Maybe I can go talk to this chief of staff network. They seem like they might need classes like this. And so I ended up talking to Scott, the founder, and I talked to Tom, who has also been involved in the community. Basically, the way Chief of Staff Network runs is that we're part of this larger consortium of communities. And Tom is the CEO of that group. And basically, Tom and I, built this relationship. He actually went to university at the same place that I did. I didn't know him, but we had a lot of mutual friends, and a lot of people that I talked to said, oh yeah, Tom's great. Like, you want to work for him. And based on all of that, we came to this conclusion that actually this consortium should buy Upslope. And so I ended up exiting to them. The IP has now become part of the Chief of Staff network offering, the BizOps network offering. And that's how I landed here.
It's amazing. Okay. I have so many questions there because like you said that you were never a person who would have done any community things, and that here you are starting your project and your company teaching cohorts and individuals. How did that happen? Tell me.
So the interesting thing, and this was actually very wrong-headed of me when I was a solo founder, was I was trying to do like B2C sales effectively. Like I was going out, I was going in Slack groups, I was going on LinkedIn saying, hey, do you as an individual want to come join this class? And that's how I really framed it. And yes, we had a Slack, and yes, we did cohorts and stuff like that. But really, it was like, you came to get the lecture materials and you came to talk to me. And that's why people showed up. And in hindsight, I really would have led with community as a demand generation mechanism. I would have said like, hey, you can get onto our wait list. And by being on the wait list, you can join our Slack immediately. The Slack has tons and tons of people in it. And we've actually got a channel dedicated to every class in every topic area. If I could do it all over, I would have done that, because I think I then would have had a pool of people who were really excited to talk about these materials, and then getting them to be paying customers would have been a slam dunk, rather than a hard slog, which is what it was. And so that's kind of how this idea of community became viable in my mind was, hey, like I have these classes, I want to get these classes in front of people. These guys have communities. It seems like there's a natural fit here. Like I want more people to benefit from these classes. Let's make the demand gen a lot easier. And community seems to be the way of doing that. Like you even see companies now creating their own internal communities, whether that's, you know, in the olden days, that was like the forums for Salesforce. Like that's one of the early communities that I can think of. And, you know, now you've got things that are, you know, there's one called Operational Analytics for Census, which is a data transfer ELT type product. And I'm seeing more and more of that, of like a product is creating a community, not in a spammy way, but to a little bit direct back to their product.
Yeah, this is interesting. And I love especially how you were able to create this cohort, and then ultimately you were able to get something very meaningful out of it, and land here at Chief of Staff, which where you are just killing it. So it all worked out really well.
Yeah, I'm really happy it worked out. I'm very happy to be here. I think trying to do everything on my own was a little dangerous. I see why people are not solo founders. But yeah, I think in the grand scheme of it, like the one thing that I will say is I ascribe a lot of this to luck. I've been very lucky throughout my career overall. And I've been lucky to land here. Now, I would not overstate that I'm somehow this magical, brilliant person. I ascribe probably like at least half of my outcomes to just being lucky.
Okay, interesting. That's very interesting. And you were also mentioning something the other day when we were talking, is that you're an introvert and you're here managing this community business. Tell me how to thrive as an introvert in a community business.
Yeah, it's been difficult in some ways, but what's interesting about my personal brand of introversion is that I've always been a work extrovert. So what I came to realize, especially in my early jobs, were that people who were vocal would get attention, and they would get promotions, and people would listen to them. And I came to realize, like, well, I have a forceful personality. I kind of do like talking. And so I'll just burn all my social energy at work. And at night, I'll go play video games and read books and like maybe talk to one person, that being my fiance. And that's it. But like, if you meet me after the hours of like 5 or 6 p.m., I'm basically a zombie. Like I cannot carry on a conversation. Yeah, so I really put it all out during my work hours, and that's a personal choice. I don't know if that would work for everyone. But the other thing that I do is I'm really good about protecting my time. And so Wednesday every week typically is my no meeting day. I thought no meeting day was a good day for us to have our chat. So that's why, we're doing this today. But typically I spend my Wednesdays just doing quiet work. I don't talk to anyone else other than like the occasional Slack. And I think what is the biggest project that I can take on in this given day? And I try and go crush that project, whatever it is. might be making a new course, it might be amending our website, it might be doing social media marketing, whatever that happens to be. That's typically how I spend my Wednesdays. And then I think those are probably the two big principles.
Interesting. And do you spend like a lot of time engaging the community?
Yeah, so I try to check out all of my communities at least every couple of days. And if there are, I especially lean in where people ask a question, where members are asking questions or needing help and not getting responses. So we had an example of someone recently saying like, hey, I'm looking to understand the business model of how orphanages work. And we don't have any members who are in that space. And so no one responded to that person. And I was thinking to myself, like, what do I know, or like what resources can I think of off the top of my head that would enable this person to get the answers they need? And I happen to be part of this thing called an expert network. It's called GLG. It's a way that people can compensate you for your time and your expertise. And I'm like, all right, well, maybe there are people in expert networks who know about this topic. And so I just linked her, this woman, a couple of expert networks. She's like, amazing. Like, I already reached out to one of them to see if there's a fit here. And so I try and go make sure that no one's falling through the cracks. But ultimately, David does such an exceptional job of really being there for the members, engaging them, running classes, all that stuff. Like, he's very much our community experience, member experience guy.
Love it. And I want to take a little segue here and get to the other question that I also had in my questions list, which is you described your management style when we were talking earlier, Ken, as a servant leadership style. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I believe a lot of things about management, I'm sure, probably more than we can discuss on this call. But I think one of the things is you should not assign people work that you yourself would not do. And so I think that's one of the principles that I hold very dear, especially because if you want to be a great manager, you also need to be a practitioner. My fiance has gone through her MBA recently, and all of her school is very much a research university. So the professors are theoretical in nature. They've done research, they've written books, but none of them are practitioners. And so she'll come back home from class and say, oh, I was in marketing today. And, my professor said this, but it's completely wrong. And it's evident this person has no idea what they're talking about. And she's a marketing revenue biz dev leader who's grown companies by multiple millions of dollars. And so I trust her much more than I trust these random professors.
Yeah.
And so I very much believe, like, whatever the meanest, meagerest, most terrible job is at the firm, I should have some experience doing it. And ultimately, if it's deemed that no one else at the firm has a good idea of how to do that job, or their skills don't lend themselves to that job, I should be the one doing that job. And my focus should be on how can I make that job happen as efficiently as humanly possible. And so early on, we had this internal issue where Ankit, our account management guy, was sending invoices and renewal reminders about membership to people by hand. And I thought, well, that's kind of nuts. It seems like that's a solved problem in the world. I've definitely seen other companies automate this. Why are we doing this by hand? And I would ask Ankit, like, hey, where are you spending your time? And then I would ask, all right, like, do you think you should be spending your time on these things, or do you have other things that you'd rather be doing? And he would come back and say, like, yeah, I'm spending half my day sending these stupid invoices, and it's obviously a waste of time. Like, I should be writing newsletters or doing blog posts or something else. And so I would watch him. I would like shadow him doing, what really is not that meaningful of a responsibility in the grand scheme of the business. But I would shadow him. I would try and send my own invoices. And then ultimately I started poking around in our tooling, and I found this buried setting that said, oh, we can automate sending this thing for you. And I toggled that on. I went back to him, and he's like, oh my God, thank you so much. So that's my approach to servant leadership, is like, I will take on the work that no one else either enjoys doing or is exceptional at. I think people really should be in their zone of genius, which is what work gives you energy and what work are you exceptional at. And I've been lucky in my career that I've picked up a lot of random skills. Like I can do basically every non-technical function out there to a passable level of quality. Not saying I'm great at it. I'm fine at operations. It's probably my thing, but I can do marketing or sales or whatever else decently. And so if everyone on the team is like, hey, we don't like analytics, we're not good at analytics, I'm like, all right, I'll go do analytics. And ultimately, that's how I think about where does the business need me? It's a stack ranking of where can our talent pitch in, and what does the business need done to keep moving? And so, when I joined, a lot of that was analytics work because we didn't have reliable metrics. And then it was a lot of this selling work because we didn't have salespeople. And then I imagine, in the future, a lot of it will be creating new communities to round out more of our offerings. Like we're thinking about doing a job seeker community for people who have been caught up in layoffs or they don't know how to navigate the job market right now. And that's something that I love doing, right? I started a training company. Like this is something that I enjoy quite a lot. Yeah, so that's that was a bit of a ramble, but that's ultimately what servant leadership means to me.
I love your management style. Again, as I said before, this is so inspiring to me. I wish, as I said, I wish I had a manager like this. And
me too.
Yeah, this is amazing because this is very empowering. If I put myself in the shoes of somebody who's reporting to you, and I can focus myself and do the work that I am really energized by, I know that I'll be more productive and I'll be happier and I'll have a more fulfilling work life. And the second thing that I want to say is this really brings out the generalist in you. So it feels like you have built yourself as a generalist, and then this role requires you to just bring that generalist side of you and put it to use.
Yeah. I think I've probably always been a generalist, and at risk of disparaging myself, probably a dilettante. I do a lot of things not very deeply. I don't know. I get curious about a lot of things. I've always been a very curious person. I never grew out of the toddler phase of being that annoying kid asking why. Yeah, I think my parents are still annoyed by that, probably. But really the way in which I've become a generalist has been, I started a startup back in 2013 when I was in university, and it failed. And that really broke my self-confidence. And up to that point, I had been very academically rigorous. I'd been top of my class, and I was full of myself. I was arrogant. I'm like, there's no problem that I can come across that is going to stump me. And to fail at something that I spent years doing, that I built a team on, that I got people to buy into, it was very humbling. And I realized my commercial sense is actually very bad. I'm a decent product-minded person. I'm decent operationally. I can hire people, I can motivate them, but do I know how to run a business rather than just a product development effort? Probably not. And to realize that about myself after doing business school as an undergraduate degree, after having all these business internships, after starting a number of various random startups, was a painful thing in my self-concept. And so after that failed, I decided, all right, I'm going to go into consulting because I want to rebuild my confidence and I want to learn a lot about a lot of things. And I was actually very lucky to land at an R&D consultancy that one day they might do a food product, and the next day they'll do architecture, and the next day they'll do software. And we got to cater to household names, Fortune 500s like Google, Uber, other ones. And so I got a lot of amazing experiences inside of big companies. And I got mentorship from people who were highly commercial, and they could point to one point in a model and say actually, if you toggle this one thing in the spreadsheet, by 0.01%, this business is going to earn another $1 million. And that is actually a real case study from a project I worked on. And that learning experience, I think, has been among the most formative things in my life. When I joined that company, I was actually scared of my coworkers because of how smart they were. And I think that's the first time in my life that's ever happened to me. And so that was really gratifying and a really rewarding experience for me. And at that job, I also started realizing, like, there are things here that no one wants to do, but the business needs them. Maybe I should go do those things. And, one of those examples was we had a voice over IP provider to run our phone systems. And we were paying far too much. And the managing director of the firm said, hey, like, why are we doing this? Can you go find me a solution? Like, yeah, I know nothing about VoIP providers, but like, yeah, maybe. And so I started looking into different options, and then we hit on Zoom, and this was way before the pandemic. So no one was really using Zoom as much back then, except for certain enterprises. And I realized, like, oh, taking on Zoom would drop our cost annually by 11K. So great, like straight out of the gate, good savings there. And then I realized, well, wait, all of our junior people on staff are sitting in these meetings taking detailed transcriptions. Zoom has a transcription feature. Why don't we just start using that? And then I did the math, and I'm like, if we assume that our staff bills out their hours to clients at this rate, and they take meeting notes at this rate, actually we could save like $1 million of billables every year that we could rebill out to clients. And that's how I started learning to do things that no one wanted to do. And I've done that ever since. Like, I just take on all the projects that no one likes.
This is very amazing, and thank you so much for sharing this. This is also a perfect way for us to segue into our last game of this interview, which involves very much to do with being a freshly graduate out of college. So I'll pass it to Piyush again. Yes. So in this round, I'm going to be a 20-year-old fresh out of college, and I'm going to present some scenarios, and you tell me what I should do in those situations.
Okay.
So I'm fresh out of college. I don't know what I want to do with my life, but I don't want to do what people around me are doing. What should I do?
Okay, I have an idea here. Are you guys familiar with this website called pioneer.app?
Yeah, a little bit.
I would recommend. Yeah, so Pioneer is basically an online tournament for ideas. And they accept anyone all over the world with, really, you just have an idea, whatever idea it is. And your idea is pitted against the ideas of other people, and your mechanisms to refine and sharpen that idea are peer feedback and metrics. And what this teaches you to do is, A, you learn a lot about what other people think are interesting. And so maybe you learn cool things and get exposed to other interesting ideas that way. But if you've got something that you actually want to do, you can, or even many ideas that you might want to work on, you can put those into the world in a very low risk way and see, like, oh, are people reacting to me in a way that indicates this is interesting, right? And it's basically an accountability engine for you to go get updates metrically and in writing. So like, oh, I talked to these customers, I got this feedback, or, oh, I won this amount of new revenue last week, or, oh, I did whatever. And so week over week, this thing, it's free and it's holding you accountable to advancing whatever idea you have. And as a knock-on effect, you learn about the ideas that other people have. And I think it helps to increase your ambition, because there are people who are, in their teens who are doing things that are blowing my mind, like things that I'm mentally incapable of understanding how they do. And the nice thing is that if your idea sort of wins the tournament, if you're in like the top 50, you get a trip to San Francisco, they give you funding for your business idea, you get to go run the business. And so actually with Upslope, I was a finalist, and I actually had to turn down that because I got acquired. And years ago, I actually applied to be the first BizOps person at Pioneer, and I was in the interview process with them as well, and ended up getting another offer, and I was just hungry to get a job at that point. So yeah, that's how I landed there. But yes, Pioneer is my recommendation.
Love this. We're gonna
Yeah.
use this.
Okay, I want to start a startup, but I don't know how to do marketing or sales. What do I do now?
Well, I think some of it's a framing problem. Is like marketing and sales are just names we give to talking to other people. So it doesn't have to be a big scary monolith. You don't need to worry about, the hundreds of years of research or the textbooks or anything like that. Really, the job is, can you talk to another human being? If you can't, maybe you shouldn't be a founder, but because your life is going to be very difficult. But really, ultimately, start with one person, right? Figure out one person who might be interested in the thing you're working on. Maybe that's a friend from university. Maybe that's someone in your neighborhood. Maybe that's your cousin who happens to work in this industry. Maybe it's your mom's friend. I don't know. Maybe it's your dentist, whoever, right? And then go talk to them, have a conversation about whatever it is that you're working on. And then at the end of that conversation, ask them, hey, do you know 2 or 3 people that might want to talk to me about this? And typically people want to be nice, especially to young people. And so you can use those connections to say, hey, like this person who we know in common really thought I should talk to you. I have this idea. I'd love your feedback on it. Can you give me 15 minutes? And you don't need to spend 30 minutes as we've learned today. Yeah, so I think really that's the way of going about it. And it certainly does work.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, I've landed my first job, but I want to accelerate my career beyond what normal people do. How do I go about it?
Yeah, so typically what I find is that acceleration only happens up to a certain point at large companies. Like if you're at a Google or a Goldman Sachs or whatever, big companies, they have these built out promotion cycles, right? You're only going to get promoted every 2 years. They look like this, the criteria are this. It's hoop jumping to a certain degree. And so if you really want to accelerate your career quite a lot, the best place you can go is to a small business, whether that is a venture-backed startup or not, kind of up to you. You need to just see that the culture of a non-venture-backed startup is germane to this. And you typically see that by checking, are there other people who are growing quickly? If I look on LinkedIn, do I see other people whose titles have changed in the span of 6 months, a year, not just every 2 years like clockwork? And then so once you realize like what sorts of companies actually enable this behavior, the thing that I would do is going back to, I would take on the work that no one else wants to do, but is important to the business. And so at my last job, I cycled through every non-technical role at the company. So I came on as a biz ops manager. I became chief of staff. I ran all of their regulatory compliance. I was like the interim finance leader, HR leader, IT leader, head of ops. I did every non-technical role at the company except for marketing, even though I did internal consulting for the marketing team and the sales team as well. So yeah, every non-technical function at that company at some point or another. And the way that happened was when someone asked like, hey, are you capable of helping with this? Internally, I would think probably not. Like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But to them, I would say, yeah, I'll help. And I knew nothing about regulatory compliance. And this was in the insurance industry in the US. And if you know anything about insurance in the US, it is a disaster because every state regulates insurance separately. So you need to maintain compliance in 50 states. All their laws are different. Everything's different. So basically, I had to go figure out like, hey, how do I learn about this? How do I start tracking whether we're in compliance? And then how do I make this run in a way that's operationally efficient? And that was my first project of something that like no one at our company wanted to do it because it sucked. And I took it on and I figured out how to make it work. And then it was just more, things snowballing from there. Like I just took on other things that people hate.
Wow. Thanks for your advice, Rahul. Back to you, Nadesh.
Yeah, this was fascinating, Rahul. I know that we're almost at time, but I have a lot of questions. So I'm going to just pause it here to respect our time. But this has been an amazing conversation. I have loved listening to you, and you've sort of become my inspiration. And a lot of the ideas that you've shared here, they have, they're really powerful. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing them with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a long time since I've done anything like this, so I was really glad to be here.